Hello, book lovers. Welcome to the 80th episode of Kiwi and the Bird, Book Nerds in Session.
I'm Taylor the Bird, and let me tell you, I am ready to talk about how just because a song has something spooky in the title does not make it a Halloween song.
I'm Keimi, the Kiwi, and I'm ready to talk about how we keep pushing up Christmas decorations and Christmas things further and further up. Like, Halloween's no longer the barrier.
No.
Like, once August is over, it's like, boom, Christmas, and that needs to stop.
Literally, Halloween's just become a haunting of Mariah Carey.
It has.
And in this episode, we're discussing Sangu Mandanna's The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches in full detail.
Yeah. So, a spoiler alert is just a little bit warranted.
Keimi, would you like to give us a spoiler alert sound effect? It's your favorite thing in the world. After all this time.
So unprepared. You would think once I would come in and I would be prepared.
Not today.
Like, Keimi, you're recording. You should have a sound effect. What a lie. My sound effect is, why is the only thing coming to mind the Oompa Loompa song?
That is a little odd. I'm not going to lie to you.
I literally just wanted to be like, Oompa Loompa doobity doo.
Oh. Now.
I've got nothing else, Tay.
I didn't know if you were going to keep going.
Oh, no.
It just stops there.
It just stops there. Guys, I'm not, actually going to sing for you. It's too much effort.
I'm just going to give you a sample, if you will.
Yeah.
Even you are a very good karaoke-er. Karaoke-oker?
That's because, oh, thank you.
Karaoke-or? Word. Now, before we get to the episode, if you like Kiwi and the Bird and want to support us, Venmoing us at Kiwi and the Bird truly does help us so much. We're young ladies. We're young witches. We want to read books. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to do this for a living.
And so any help, any donations are sincerely appreciated. And thank you very much.
Too real.
There was some true angst there.
And now on to our discussion.
Now, if you didn't know, we've started doing our discussions in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, just a little bit.
We're breaking it down into two different categories. What we liked about the book and what we didn't like the book. Now, did I say that right?
What we liked about the book and what we didn't like. Yeah.
Yes. And so we'll typically choose 3 items per each category, unless if we really loved the book or unless if we really didn't like the book. So, Keimi, what was something you really, truly enjoyed about The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches?
Do I go general or really specific? I'm going to go really specific for a second.
Oh.
There is this one moment in the book where they're having, I believe it's when they're in the woods after coming back from the Primrose thing. When Mika meets Primrose for tea and she tells
has
him
to
about,
lie.
Yes, all that. And is it? I could be wrong. Anyway, it's a moment where they're it's there's tension because they're not quite together yet. Right?
Mika and Jamie?
Yes. Yeah. I should have mentioned that. When Mika and Jamie, tensions are rising. You can tell that they're feelings are feeling, but they don't want to admit it yet, right? And so there's this moment where there's charged eye contact, you know?
I love a good charged eye contact, let me tell you.
And it's the moment where they just go hi and then hi, which if you didn't know, there's a scene in Roman Holiday where they're on the barge and they're dancing and they have the eye contact and they say hello and hello. It's my favorite part, and that's my favorite movie. So that one moment, I was just oh, very. It's not necessarily them though; they are very cute, but it was very reminiscent of Roman Holiday, and so I was kicking my feet a little bit, and I was just oh, that was so cute. So I really liked that moment. I did think it was a good example of how cute and cozy and sweet the romance was.
It was I liked that it was a very real moment.
Yes.
Where sometimes when you are in those, if you're in that sort of position, and there's so much emotion. It's so like me right now. It's so overwhelming that you look at that person and it's like, you want to fill up the space because you recognize there's a silence, but then you don't know how to. And so there's just that very genuine, very innocent, very shy hi. Yeah. But then it recenters the moment and brings you two back together. It's so sweet and so tender.
So sweet. I love it. So good. It's just such an innocent moment and like such a charged situation. And it's just the just so good.
Is that where they kiss too?
For the first time, I believe so.
Okay.
I believe. I could be like mixing things up. I won't lie to you. I read this all in like one sitting.
Literally about 3 hours ago.
Yeah. But I mean, I can kind of like segue into it, and the fact that I actually really enjoyed how sweet this romance was.
Yes.
That I feel like the in this modern day era of books.
Modern day.
The trend is more so angst, which we love, but it's like angst to the max, where it's like you get
unhealthy.
Yes, you get, trauma bond equals romance, which is not my favorite. So to see a romance that was so sweet, it's just so nice to read because it was sweet throughout the entire story. It was completely consistently sweet, which really surprised me because there is a sex scene. And usually when there's a sex scene, like things kind of get, I call it romantasy. Where it's like a little aggressive and very lustful and all of these things. And it's not really my cup of tea.
Oh.
But I think the story did a really good job of kind of balancing the physical attraction with the sweetness. Because I've read a book recently where it's a contemporary where the sex scene should have been sweet, but it felt much more aggressive than it needed to be. And I was like, I feel like this is just placating to that audience. So the fact that this wasn't that, and it was just very consistent, and its sweetness was very, very refreshing, and I would love to see more of it.
Yeah, what I really appreciated about this romance was that they talked a lot before they had sex. Mm-hmm. They emotionally connected deeply before they had sex, which of course in different relationships, every relationship has its own different piece.
Yes.
As a reader, I do tend to prefer when there's an emotional connection before physical because I feel like it enriches the physical. Mm-hmm. And in this book, it does for me because it adds the love component. It makes me feel the love. It makes me... I love how touched we get. We're always like...
I love sweetness, Tay. Soft boys for the win.
And so I liked that, like you said, the sweetness was consistent and the characters didn't change when it came to physical intimacy. Mm-hmm. Because that is very common in contemporaries where it's like, it feels like contemporaries almost have to rival that, like you said, the romantasy, the very hot, the very, like, almost in a way kind of shocking scenes. And so I liked that this one maintained its own feeling and its own consistency and its own atmosphere. Like, it wasn't trying to be something else. It stayed itself. Mm-hmm. And that's what I appreciate the most about it.
Yeah.
And with the romance, one of my favorite scenes was when it was late one night, Mika was catching stardust from a meteor shower.
Yeah. And
that kind of started off this new routine that her and Jamie had where they'd meet together late at night, share a drink or two. And then, she'd tell him a little bit about her witchcraft. And, like, they would share things, basically, on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
And it's, like, the first time that they connected in that different way. That's past just normal.
See, I really loved that, too, because it was, like, you typically think a man, a woman, late at night. Things are bound to happen, right? And I love how there was a little bit of that, obviously, because there's the romance, but, like, not so much where you expected it. You were just like, oh, no, they're just getting to know each other, and it's this very tender moment that they're having. And the fact that it was, like, it happened every night, it was just, like, it was a little routine where they would just talk.
Yes. They were comfortable with each other. It was very adorable.
It was really... Yeah. I love, guys, I can't tell you how much I love pure romances. Like, they just get me. And I get them.
You got, and they got goo.
But Tay, what was something that you didn't like about
Oh,
the story?
no. I feel bad because, like, because it is a very sweet story.
Yes.
I think one of the things that, and it's not like I hated it or it's the worst part. It's not like that at all. I think I wish that some of the characters' backstories had been a little bit more integrated into the narration, or some sort of foreshadow before we got their backstory. Because sometimes some of the backstories kind of felt like they came out of nowhere. And I could have been maybe not kind of reading between the lines. I maybe wasn't getting the subtext, but all of a sudden I was like, oh, like that was a really huge component of your backstory that really hurt you. And then all of a sudden it's just kind of here. And so I think I wish there had been a little bit more of like a gentle slope into the backstories rather than it feeling shocking to me. But that might just be a me personal thing.
Can I ask what character you felt the most with?
So
was it Jamie?
So the two characters I felt the most was Jamie and then Mika as well.
Oh.
So with Mika, it wasn't her childhood. It was her ex-boyfriend.
Oh.
Where all of a sudden she's in the car and she's saying, well, he would, make me use my matcha to do this, to do that, to do this. And I know that they had mentioned a past relationship, but that just seemed so bad and so like hard to go through that I wish I had kind of seen it like roll, like there would have been like a little snowball coming up to it before it was said. And then with Jamie, with his backstory, I felt a little bit of the same.
Okay.
But that might just be me.
No, I think for me, Jamie's made more sense to me than Mika's. But I mean, with Mika's like her childhood, yes. I do agree with the boyfriend though. Because, she does mention that she had that relationship. And in her conversation with Primrose, it's like, oh yeah, and then I saw him, I will say I was expecting it to be worse.
Yeah.
Just based on the foreshadowing that we had.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad it kind of like, it wasn't in like some way. Because I'm like, oh, like, I don't think I want to see this character going through something worse. But I do wish that the foreshadowing maybe matched up a bit more of the story.
Like, I would have thought that with that backstory, it would have made her super hesitant to love. Particularly, like, romantically. Like, oh, I'm starting to realize I'm kind of having romantic feelings for Jamie. But, oh, he'll just use me. He'll just, or even something like that, that would maybe add a little bit, that would just connect the past to the present a little bit more. I think that's what I felt was a little foggy for me.
No, I see that. Because Jamie was definitely the one that was like a bit more like, I can't start this relationship. I actually do wish Jamie had like more, what's the word? Barriers?
Oh.
More.
Like walls that had to come down? Boundaries?
No, like I needed him to have more of an issue with like Mika potentially becoming kind of like a mother figure to these children.
Oh.
Kind of like what that would do to the kids. Because throughout the story, they kind of mention how Jamie is kind of like their parent.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of like their parental figure. And if he were to get into a romantic relationship, that would, like, kind of being married. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, whoever his love interest would be would also kind of have to step up to that role of parent. So I do kind of wish I had seen a bit more of that. Or, like, maybe that's why he was so reluctant to love. Because based on his backstory, I was a little bit like, I can see why you wouldn't trust people, but then he was raised by people who taught him how to love and like taught him like it's okay to trust people. And so that it makes sense why he didn't trust her at first, but it didn't make sense as to why he didn't want to love her.
I think even with that point, I think it would have been interesting to see the girls kind of having maybe a struggle with that, like seeing Mika as a motherly figure, because they haven't really ever had that. I mean, I know that they had Lucy and that they have had Ken and Ian, and like they've had the love basically. But like you said, that's a very distinct personage in one's life. And so, yeah, I do think that could have been an interesting concept to explore.
Yeah. I think that also could have maybe more grounded Terracotta a bit more. Because, like, yeah, I mean, it was understood that she just didn't want someone coming in and, like, ruining what she already had, which I think is reason enough.
Yeah.
But I also, like, I would have loved to see how she would have wanted more of a motherly figure in her life, and how maybe she didn't want Mika in that position, and how she's kind of struggled with her sisters, and, like, they do, but I don't.
Yeah. And kind of maybe being jealous that it seems like they're receiving affection and she isn't, or, you know, things like that can kind of add to that emotional basis. But also, you know, the story isn't really, like, I don't think the story necessarily needs to handle all those things.
It doesn't, no.
But I think those are interesting things that could have been handled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that was, like, more of a between the lines thing, too. But I think I would have wanted to see it more on the forefront.
But let's swing it back to the positive. What's something else that you loved about the book?
How about something you loved, and then I'll do something I didn't like? Let's try to even things out a bit.
One thing that I mean, there were multiple things, not one. It's just the second point. Okay, I feel like I'm being super
Taylor liked this book, guys.
I did. For the second point of the things that we loved, I really liked the side characters in this book. Ken is the sweetest. I love Ken.
Yes.
I thought Ken was super sweet. I like that he was kind of like the logic backbone, but a softer logic backbone than Jamie. Like, Jamie was too far with logic and hard-headedness.
Yeah.
Ken was a beautiful little medium where he's kind of like the focal point that everyone's balancing on. And then I thought Ian, you know, trying to match me, trying to, you know.
We are Ian. We understand that.
We were Ian during Singles Inferno. But I also really liked Lucy, too. And I liked how each side character contributed something different to the story. Even the children did, too. You know, Terracotta added kind of the feistiness and the reluctance in a way that paired well with Jamie's, but was different. And same with the other two girls, Altamira. I love that she was the swearer. And then I loved that Rosetta was, you know, very sweet, very, you know, kind. But then also, you know, like if she was mad, she'd let you know she was mad. You know? And so I liked that all of those characters, again, worked together super well, but were distinct on their own and could hold on their own too. They didn't feel like they were so much of the same, because sometimes with side characters, it feels like you have too much of the same person, that there's not enough different viewpoints to add contrast to the story. Yeah. But I felt like this story did in a very sweet and very realistic way.
Yeah, I loved the side characters, because they were they were their own character, and they each had their own place in the story. And like there are those like secondary side characters, I call them, where it's like they're kind of placed in the story just to move things along. They are plot devices. Yeah. But none of the main side characters or the primary side characters were any of those, which I really love. I love having stories with a lot of characters and having, like, they're each different people, and you see that. I was actually really impressed with the kids, particularly, because I think it's difficult to capture a child's character in an adult book. Yes. Yes. And it's not done very well most of the time.
It's hard. It's hard to come off as, I know what you're thinking. It's hard to be realistic as a kid. It's hard to write a child because, especially at those ages, you know, it's like, how would they really speak?
But that's the thing. I think that she did really well in establishing each child as their own character, because I also think because children are kind of really difficult to differentiate in a story, they kind of just get muddled and they're all basically one kid. But that wasn't the case at all. And I actually saw a lot of like my own nieces in these characters. Like the oldest, I was like, oh my gosh, that is my oldest niece. For sure. For sure. And like Altamira, I was like, oh, that's my second. Yeah, no, I see it.
Oh, yeah.
I see it for sure. So I was like, no, like this author knows children and was able to write them well. I mean, do I think that they could have been disciplined more? Absolutely.
Do I think they should have been disciplined more? Maybe.
No, not even maybe. That's a hard yes.
Especially if they're magical children. I'm like, there have to be parameters here.
But I just, the side characters just really elevated the story, which is exactly what they're supposed to do.
Like, if these side characters weren't in this book, it would really hurt the book.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's a good side character.
Yeah.
Because if you can take a side character out and it doesn't affect the book, then that side character needs to be a little bit more implanted.
That side character is going to die and we're going to feel nothing.
We're just going to sip our tea.
Apathy. That's how apathy is created. Was it my turn to do something I didn't like?
Yes.
One thing I did. Okay, I will kind of segue.
Oh.
I didn't like how the children were not disciplined. Like, a part of me was like, yes, I understand letting children kind of be who they are and like doing all these things. But a part of me was like, Terracotta has like, yes, she's her own. And we like, you don't want to discourage feistiness and standing up for yourself. But there's also a thing called respect for adults. And I was like, isn't Jamie supposed to be like the hard-headed, stern one? Like, I'm sorry, where's his, hey, no, don't do that, you know?
Yeah.
And like, it is going to be different with each child. Rosetta does not need as much discipline as the other two, but the other two most definitely did. I was like, you basically, I mean, yeah, Jamie was like a little bit mad about them animating Lillian's corpse. But he wasn't as mad as he should have been.
Yeah.
Or we didn't see the consequences. Like, It's like these children had zero consequences. And I was like, no. Gentle parenting only works halfway. Those kids need consequences.
I think when Terracotta died, Altamire's hair green.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, okay, she apologized. Like, that one, I was like, okay. Probably could have been disciplined a little more, but I was like, all right. Mm-hmm. But with the case of Mika getting hit with an actual literal lightning bolt, I was like, guys, we can't just hug this out, okay? She literally, like, directly disobeyed a reasonable adult who's teaching her magic, who, like, could cause harm to herself. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, like, caused harm to someone else and bad harm. Mm-hmm. I was like, I think she needs a little bit more than, like, oh, no. Like, I think she needs...
Yeah, these children were just scolded.
Yeah.
That's all they were.
But, like, the softest scold on the planet, like, we don't hurt people with magic. I'm like, guys, like, but you did hurt someone with magic, so, like... I don't know.
No, honestly, that did kind of bug me. And I was like, I think it's really funny because at the beginning, you're like, am I just like, would I just be a really hard parent? And I was like, no, those children needed consequences. They needed like, I do kind of wish we had seen more of that punishment. And I think that could have maybe gone more into how Jamie is more of a parent figure for them. And maybe that's why he's so reluctant to like have someone come into their lives. See, we tie things back.
We tie things back.
Yeah.
Or even if Mika's like, hey, Jamie, I respect you, but I think that, to be a true parent figure, that maybe having discipline can really help ground these girls. And that can kind of be a little bit of his arc.
Yeah.
Great.
And be like having them a bit more, like, yes, have them discover who they are with their magic. And that's great. But like, they need to have a foundation of discipline.
Yes. This is so funny coming from us, though, I must say.
Two childless single women. Hey, I babysit a lot.
It's true.
I have 6 nieces and nephews.
I have 3 cousins. They haven't had to be babysat for years, but I used to.
Like, they're the only children I have contact with.
But bring us back to the light. Mm-hmm. Tell us something you love for number 3.
I really liked the lore.
Ooh.
I liked how it's kind of based on, like kind of our history, things of like with witches and how they were, burned and like hunted down. But it was given like its own little lore of like a witch's magic is like golden dust.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And how it's still kind of, you still had the potions and like the broomstick was like the car and all these things. So
cute
like
little nods almost.
Yeah. But it also had its own little thing of like, oh yeah, like why witches are orphaned, right? Because it's a spell gone wrong trying to protect them. But like, I like those things where it's like, oh, there's a reason for this. It's not just, oh, that's just how it's always been. Yeah. I like that things are given a reason and it makes sense within that world. So like that's a way that I think the author did a really good job of weaving the real with the magical. Like when that whole conversation that they had about witches, like the witch's history, I was like, this is fascinating. I love this. I love lore.
You do love lore.
I love lore. I will say though, it was during that conversation, I was like, oh yeah, you're the sister. You're the twin sister. I see that. Same.
I was like, oh, Lillian just so happens to be missing, but you're here. And
and she has a sister whose name is also a flower.
And her sister was really talented with wards.
And we just learned that Lillian like might be dead. It's been like alluded.
And that her sister recently died.
Weird. But yeah, the lore. It's not a lot. It really isn't, but it's enough that I wasn't like left questioning.
It's enough where it shows that there was thought put into it.
Yeah.
But it's not overwhelming for a magical realism story.
Yeah.
With the lore too, I love the application of magic.
Yeah.
I love the ingredients, like you said, the brewing, the potion making. I liked that certain witches have different proficiencies, and that for Mika it was potion making, and that I liked how she would kind of craft the recipes in her mind and be like, okay, well this plant is known for this and that, and this will help like give people with hard edges softer demeanors, and I was like, if I had that in real life, I would be so powerful.
She actually used her magic.
Yes.
Like she was a witch and she did witchy things the whole time.
And that is rare. That is rare, let me tell you. But yeah, and so I liked that, again, it felt really, really realistic, and also too that she could, in the end, fulfill her dreams of the potion making, the apothecary, basically, because like people could buy that stuff and think, oh well, it's just if I am lucky, it is coincidental, but then it really is because it's magic.
It's cute.
It's cute.
I love it. Yeah, it was really well done.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But are we gonna end? Yeah, well, let's do it. Let's end with the last thing you didn't like.
No, let's end it happy.
No, that's our last one.
Well,
you said you were left with questions. What questions were you left with?
I did have questions.
What were your questions? I want to know.
Well, my first question is, well, okay. So the thing is that for me with stories, if it's a single book, I don't know if this is a part of a series. I will say it might be, but I don't like having questions when it's one book. I had this with When Among Crows. Like when something feels open-ended, it kind of bugs my mind a little bit.
Eleanor Park.
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
My heart. And so with this book, I felt like I still had a few questions where they're answered enough. I mean, they are addressed, but I don't quite feel satisfied by them. One of the ones was that with the curse, the spell that backfired, that orphans all witches. I was like, well, if a lot of witches got together to do this spell and it backfired, couldn't we get a lot of witches together and undo the spell? Because it's pretty horrible that any witch who has a child dies, basically, and their child gets orphaned. That's terrible.
Yeah, that's a really fair point.
And I felt like with the lore that was brought into it about the witch hunters and things like that, I felt like that was, for me personally at least, too much of an open door that it needed more closing in my mind.
The shapeshifter paragraph in Breaking Dawn-esque.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Literally.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I actually would have accepted the answer that I knew before then. Like, it's just kind of just the basis of the, like, that's just kind of fact.
Yeah.
But having that open, then it made me wonder, then it made me think it was going to come into the plot more because it was brought up and things like that.
Oh, I do see that. Yeah.
And so then at the end I was like,
like if there are witches, you use the term witch hunter general.
Yeah.
Does that mean that there are witch hunters out there since there are witches?
Because then that would also support why Primrose was like, don't get into groups very often. You know, that's why there's these rules and certain precautions. I feel like it would have helped reinforce that. But again, if it hadn't been brought up, I don't think I would have really been thinking about that as much. But it was. And then I was like,
I do see that. For me, I was just thinking more so in terms of history of like the Salem witch trials and how like there were witch hunters.
Yes.
Right? So that's where my mind went. But I can see why you would think that.
And I was like, or even like with Lillian trying to find basically a sanctuary for witches where they could perform magic without having to hide. Lillian had brought that up and Mika had. So then I was like, is this going to play like a part? So I don't know. And so it's like, it's not the biggest thing. And it doesn't necessarily hurt the story. But I felt like at the end, they were on my mind.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, sequel?
No, I see that. No. Until you said that, like, I didn't even think about that. Like, in my head, I a little bit, I was like, but you made enchanted wards. So can't they just live within enchanted wards?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that I'm like, then you could literally have a witch sanctuary. Just have 50 witches make the wards, the most powerful wards of literally all time, and then everyone have a party. Just have your own neighborhood that's a little witchy with a witchy potluck.
I do kind of understand why the author wouldn't put witch hunters in this, though.
And I do get it.
Because it's a cozy.
Yes.
And the fact that Jamie was just normal human.
Yes.
Really played into that.
Yes.
Because if there was a witch hunter, it would be like, love triangle, angst.
Well, or he was a secret witch hunter the whole time.
Yeah. Which isn't the story.
No.
Which is why I think she kind of more so relied on like, oh, there's a history of hunting witches rather than like, there are witch hunters. Or at least that's what I think she tried to do.
I think it may have literally only been because she had mentioned specifically witch hunter general. I was like, this is an official term here, you know. Actually, I think there is in history a witch hunter general in England.
Think so,
yeah, that actually does sound familiar.
Yeah.
But I think it was just because of that was like...
Because we're so conditioned and like, oh, fantasy, there must be the opposite. Like, if anything of the opposite is mentioned, then we're like, oh, it's going to come in as
it's going to come back. It turns out that everyone who's been orphaned, they weren't actually, like, it always is like...
Oh, I definitely see that.
Yeah.
For sure, though.
And so, it's kind of, like, not the biggest point, but...
Oh, no. Tate, do you know how nitpicky I have been with other books? Like, this doesn't even come close. I'm still mad at Fourth Wing for not telling me what a green dragon does.
You're like, after all this time, even still.
I was like, you have 680 pages. You can't just mention briefly what a freaking green dragon does? Like, oh my gosh, your world is already as small as it is. Like, it's not going to take that much time. Oh, okay, sorry.
Just one line.
That turned into a tangent.
A hiccup, sorry. It was powerful. Yeah.
Honestly, if there was a sequel, I think I would read it.
I know, I'd love to read a sequel. Yeah.
Maybe see Rosetta more in like the real world and like how she deals, or like how Terracotta ends up in the real world.
If she gets disciplined.
That would be great. I would love to see that development.
I would. That's the arc we're looking for. It's just the discipline.
Discipline your children.
Well, especially if they're magical. Because even when Rosetta did the cyclone at the bookstore, I'm like, okay, like, she didn't hurt anyone. But, and like, she's still trying to control her powers. I get it.
And she didn't mean to.
She didn't mean to. And so I'm like, I guess she didn't necessarily do anything bad.
But it should have been mentioned like a little bit more.
Like, oh, I don't know.
It's like, hey, like, maybe we should like take some time and like see if we can get your emotions more under control.
Yeah. Maybe.
But I was just like, did you have fun? Then that's great. And it's like, no. She tore up books and you had to pay for them.
And she didn't have to pay for them. You did.
Yeah.
Anyways.
That's the thing. It's just kind of the parents we would be. Thank you so much for joining us today on Kiwi and the Bird. let us know on our Spotify Q&A or on social media what you think about The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna.
Speaking of social media, if you would like to, we won't force you. We could. But feel free to follow us on social media on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. Actually, we are on Facebook. You can follow us at Kiwi and the Bird. And if you'd like to send us a business inquiry, forward it to kiwiandthebirdpodcast at gmail.com. Yeah, don't forget the podcast. Because there is a podcast in there.
Yeah. But also feel free to check out our other episodes in the meantime. I think we're pretty funny.
I mean, we might be biased, but we're hilarious.
Hilarious. And remember, like a library, at Kiwi and the Bird, happens.